So today, it's been a long path for me to get to this video. It's been a long time. I wanted to test two lenses in particular, quite related. The Hektor here and the Summaron here, both 28 millimeters. The Hektor is older. This one in particular is from 1940, but was produced between 1935 and 1963. Basically, this lens, it's a 28 millimeter 6.3 of aperture, was a reaction against the arrival of the Zeiss for Contax 28 millimeter f8 tesseract. And it's super compact. Basically, the cap, the background cap, the back cap is more thicker than the lens. So it's a very compact lens. The aperture ring is actually not a ring. It's a small lever here that you can rotate. And you actually have the European annotations on this version. Only the latest versions have the international annotation. So basically here, aperture is 6.3, 9, 12.5, 18, and 25, as opposed to the usual markings of 2.8, 5, 6, etc. Yeah, so this one is from 1940. It's a lens made of 5 elements in 3 groups. And basically a L39 mount. I adapted it for M mount and also for L mount with 2 adapters for my tests. And yeah, it's got a strong vignetting in terms of reputation, but it's supposed to be very sharp in the center and have lots of personality. So I was really curious because it's hard to find comparisons between this one and his successor. One of his successors, the Summaron 28 millimeter f5.6. This one actually is also a problem because it has been re-edited in 2016. So the original series was from 1955 to 1963. Basically, as for the Hektor, there's about a little bit more than 9,000 pieces that have been produced. And this one is, after its remake having new coatings, modern coatings on the lenses, basically for flares and ghost images. It's a classic, both in terms of sharpness and character. It's supposed to be sharp and smooth. There's also vignetting in the descriptions when you look online, but it's actually hard to find the description of the vintage lens because the new re-edition tends to take over in terms of descriptions of reviews online. But otherwise, basically, this one is the original design. The new one has the same optical design, except for those coatings. And yeah, super compact and a traditional ring for aperture. And basically the notings also the 5.6, 8, and etc. So it's going to be more explicit with examples. So I tested both of those lenses basically in same settings just to see the differences. And so let's go take a look. Okay, so now let's go to the photo examples. I think that's the most important part of this comparison. So let's start with the Hektor 28mm f6.3. Those first 2 images, basically here what we see, it's with the SL2, Leica SL2. It's got its importance for these 2 lenses. So Hektor here, full aperture at 6.3. First we can see that the geometry seems pretty well maintained. Lots of vignetting, that's for sure. We can really definitely see it strongly on the blue sky on the right. Otherwise, quite interesting rendering. It seems quite smooth, but with lots of precision. Again, those 2 pictures, next pictures in high contrast. The picture on the left, like the 2 first ones are in Geneva on a sunny day. When the composition is a little bit more charged in terms of details, you don't see the vignetting as much, but we can definitely see that there's lots of precision in this lens, even so it's kind of glowy. We can see also on the picture on the right, that's the Bay of Reykjavik. Let's maybe zoom in here, full zoom almost in the middle of the picture. We can see that there's lots of definition, even so it's a really old lens. But we see that glowing aspect in high contrast zones, which actually adds quite some character with the vignetting and with all the other color characteristics of the lens. But we definitely can see those details very well. And yeah, very interesting rendering for now. Again, 2 pictures. Picture on the left, that's Geneva Bay. nothing much to say about the quality of the rendering. On the right also lots of detail, this kind of slow, slight glow, I would say, not slow. It's kind of interesting in the high detail zones because we still have the detail, but we have, it's kind of more poetic, and we see actually that definitely in the borders we lose the definition, that's for sure. Here again, very interesting fact in high contrast with the sun. We can see it. There's some phantom images, but the flare is not that strong. Otherwise, it's not very disturbing. There's a small kind of starry effect on the sun on the high contrast zone in the middle, but very nice rendering for this really facing the sun picture. Also on the right, that's a picture I find interesting in low light situations with high contrast because of artificial lighting. Let's zoom in. Here again, full resolution on the SL2. There's a glow, but we do have the definition in the center of the picture, which make for a very, very interesting, with lots of personality results. If we go to the next two pictures, this is what's important with the sensors. I've seen other tests about the lens, and it's talking about the lens doing this kind of magenta fringing on the borders. That's actually the sensor. Mostly, the lens actually sends the rays really in a steep angle, and it does this kind of magenta fringe when your sensor doesn't have the microprisms on front of it like the SL2 has. That's an M240 Leica. Otherwise, as you can see, the rendering is pretty neat. Actually, the fringing doesn't disturb me that much. I find it gives some character to the picture, a little bit like some kind of expired film. Anyhow, that's my taste. But yeah, very nice rendering of the colors and the details. Here again, the picture on the left, that's just to give an idea of the limited bokeh. There is some, even with the tree on the foreground, but don't count on having really shallow depths of field with the 6.3 lens. And again on the right, just to show how neatly direct light, high contrast don't really disturb the scene. I think that's one of the strengths of this lens. And here again, those two pictures in night situations with modern sensors, it's pretty nice. We went back to the SL2. The ones with the fringing is the M240. Otherwise, it's always the SL2. As we can see here, even in high contrast situations, it's always a really nice, artistically sound result of the high contrast light sources. Here are two more pictures with the Hektor. Yeah, just to give you an idea of this very strong personality, actually. Here, it's a comparison, so I won't go too much into comparing side by side everything, but I did two pictures. The one on the left, that's a Hektor. On the right, that's the Summaron. They're both at full aperture, so 6.3 on the left, 5.6 on the right. They're quite similar, but you can already see there's more glow in high contrasts with the Hektor, which I kind of find interesting. It's softer. The detail seems to be here on both. Maybe the color's a little bit warmer on the Summaron. Let's check maybe a zoom in the central part of the pictures. Not very different. There's definitely a gain in definition on the Summaron, but that makes sense. It's a more modern lens. It came after. But the rendering is otherwise pretty much similar. And actually, I like both. In the center, we definitely have lots of definition and of detail. Here, I'm going in the periphery, and that's where there's a bigger difference. As we could see before, the vignetting was stronger on the Hektor. It's a little bit better contained on the Summaron. Again, that's the first version of the Summaron, the historical one. And we can see that there's a loss of, not of definition, but there's more glow in the borders, in the periphery of the Hektor rendering compared to the one from the Summaron. But both are really nice. I actually kind of like that stronger personality with the Hektor. Question of taste, but otherwise it works pretty fine. Here we're going to more traditional Summaron images. That's with the SL2. That's Silicon Valley, Palo Alto. As we can see, there is some vignetting, a little bit less pronounced than with the Hektor. Really great rendering, lots of precision all over, let's say on the whole field of the picture. Here again, good geometry, nothing much to say there. The one on the left, that's still Silicon Valley. On the right, that's Milano in Italy. You can see the kind of rendering of colors. It's actually a little bit more neutral, but has got lots of personality too. I'd be curious to test the new version from 2016, but here we can see in low light situations or with slight contrast, small artificial lights, small points, the rendering's pretty nice. There is a small star-like glow on the high contrast light sources, but really works well. I can see why this lens is a classic. Here again, for street photography, it's definitely a great lens. You can also do your hyperfocal distance focusing, and yeah, really great rendering overall. As we can see here, natural colors, a slight glow maybe in the vignetting. It's really old school, but very high quality rendering. Here on the left, that's a more subtle lit situation, just to give you an idea of the precision of the lens and height renders. And on the right, that's where that's maybe one of the flaws. I don't know if it's a flaw actually of the Summaron. It's this sort of kind of weird starry image when you have a direct light source. Maybe it's my lens, this one in particular, that does it, but I've seen some reviews where there has been also this kind of glow and flaring. It adds something to the picture. We don't lose the definition underneath, but it's kind of not very regular. It's kind of, and that's probably something that's been corrected with the new coatings from the modern version of the lens. Here again, when you see that it's not as much contrast and not such a strong focal light source, it works really great. Lots of definition everywhere and very good geometry and rendering even in low light situations, like we have here with a modern sensor, which is SL2. Here, last image also to say that I haven't talked about it before, but the pictures from Milano were on the M240 camera, so there's less of this purple fringing than with the Hektor on other kinds of sensors. So that might be a point that's of importance. But here, the picture on the left, you still have this kind of weird glow using a Leica M8 camera, which doesn't have a full frame sensor, but AP8H. So you'll have less vignetting and color fringing on the M8, almost none, but you'll still have this weird flare glow on those strong light sources. But otherwise, really a great rendering on the right. That's an M240 again, slight flaring and purple fringing, magenta fringing on the borders, but not as pronounced as with the Hektor. So yeah, I personally have a small preference for the Hektor at the end. That's kind of I had ups and downs. Sometimes I liked the precision of the Summaron more. It's got definitely a better definition most of the time in most parts of pictures. But I really like this kind of creamy look of the Hektor, and they're both really fun to use, and the results have lots of personality. So hopefully this comparison, not very scientific, but will give you some ideas if you have to choose for one of those very compact lenses, historical lenses. And yeah, hope you enjoyed it. If you have questions, comments, suggestions, don't hesitate, and catch you next time.